Welcome back to the board. Today, two of the strongest shogi engines face off, C2AC562E YOI NNUE Book 202600510 moving first, Ascent, against Giku2_1C. Let's follow it quietly, move by move. Cent plays the gold to 58. Goat pushes the pawn to 84. Cent pushes the pawn to 76. Goat pushes the pawn to 34. Cent pushes the pawn to 66. Goat responds by pushing the pawn to 85. Cent plays the bishop to 77. Goat brings the silver to 72. Cent brings the gold to 67. Goat brings the silver to 83. Cent plays the silver to 48, an inaccuracy that clearly favors Goat, as the engine preferred the silver to 68 instead. Goat plays the gold to 52. Cent pushes the pawn to 36, an inaccuracy when the engine preferred 56, and the game now clearly favors Cent. Goat plays the pawn to 74. Cent pushes the pawn to 26, a slight inaccuracy, as the engine preferred 65 instead, and the game now clearly favors Cent. Goat moves the bishop to 55. Cent brings the knight out to 37. Goat plays the silver to 22. Cent pushes the pawn to 65. Goat plays the bishop to 33. Cent plays the silver to 88, a mistake that clearly favors Goat, with the engine preferring the pawn to 25 instead. Goat plays the silver to 84. Cent plays the gold to 78, an inaccuracy that clearly favors them, with the engine preferring the gold to 68 instead. Goat brings the king to 42, building a Yagura-style castle around it. Cent pushes the pawn to 46, a mistake since the engine preferred the bishop to capture the bishop on 33, and the game now clearly favors Cent. Goat plays the silver to 73. Cent plays the gold to 56, a move the engine preferred to capture the bishop on 33, but this was a mistake and the game now clearly favors Cent. Goat plays the rook to 62, swinging it across in a ranging rook approach. Cent plays the gold to 45, which was a mistake, as the engine preferred a pawn push to 25 instead, and the game now clearly favors Cent. Goat plays the bishop captures the bishop on 77, promoting to a horse, with check. Cent plays the silver captures the horse on 77, which was a mistake according to the engine, as it preferred the knight capturing the horse on 77 instead. And Goat responds by moving the silver to 33. Cent drops a bishop on 15, a mistake that clearly favors Cent, and the engine preferred the knight to 25. Goat pushes their pawn to 14. Cent's bishop captures the silver on 33, promoting to a horse, delivering check. Goat's king captures the horse on 33. Cent plays the pawn to 35, a mistake that clearly favors Cent, and the engine preferred the pawn to 25 instead. Goat plays the king to 42. Cent drops a silver on 22. Goat pushes the pawn to 64. Cent captures the pawn on 34 with their pawn. Goat's pawn then takes the pawn on 65. Cent brings their gold to 35. Goat pushes their pawn to 66, which was a mistake, as the engine preferred their king to 51, and the game now clearly favors them. Cent drops a pawn on 68. Goat plays the gold to 31, a mistake that clearly favors Cent, and the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 67 here. Cent captures the lance on 11 with the silver, promoting it to a promoted silver. Goat moves the king to 51. Cent drops the promoted silver to 12. Goat pushes the pawn to 44, an inaccuracy that makes the game clearly favor Cent when the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 72. Cent pushes the pawn to 25. Goat pushes the pawn to 75, a mistake that clearly favors Cent, with the engine preferring a bishop drop on 55 instead. Cent pushes the pawn to 24. Goat drops a pawn on 36, which was a mistake, as the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 67, and the game now clearly favors Goat. Cent captures the pawn on 36 with their gold. Goat captures the pawn on 76 with their pawn. Cent plays the silver till 88. Goat plays the king to 61, a blunder that clearly favors Goat, with the engine preferring to drop a bishop on 67 instead. Cent pushes the pawn to 45. Goat captures the pawn on 45. Cent drops a pawn on 44. Goat drops a pawn on 35, a blunder that clearly favors Goat, as the engine preferred a bishop drop on 95. Cent plays the gold, capturing the pawn on 35. Goat pushes the pawn to 46, a blunder that clearly favors Cent, and the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 83 instead. Cent plays the gold to 36. Goat pushes the pawn to 86, a mistake that clearly favors Cent, with the engine preferring the pawn to 47, promoting to a token instead. Cent's gold captures the pawn on 46. Goat drops a bishop on 94, though the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 83 instead, as this move now clearly favors Goat. Cent plays the silver to 47. Goat drops a pawn on 36, a blunder that now clearly favors Goat, though the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 39 instead. Cent's silver captures the pawn on 36. Goat drops a bishop on 39. Cent plays the rook to 18, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat captures the pawn on 57 with their bishop, promoting it to a horse. Cent plays the gold to 47, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the horse to 39, a blunder since the engine preferred the horse to capture the gold on 47 instead, though the game now clearly favors Goat. Cent drops a pawn on 58. Goat plays the horse to 29, a blunder which now clearly favors Goat, the engine preferred dropping a pawn on 35 instead. Cent's king moves to 48, a move that still leaves Goat clearly on top, though perhaps Cent hopes to improve the king's safety this way. Goat's bishop moves to 83, a blunder which now clearly favors Goat, as the engine preferred the horse capturing the rook on 18. Cent drops a lance on 38, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat captures the pawn on 87 with a pawn, promoting to a token, though the engine would have preferred the horse to capture the rook on 18. Cent plays the silver, capturing the token on 87, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a pawn on 35, a blunder that shifts the game to Goat's favor, though the engine preferred dropping a pawn on 88. Cent drops a pawn on 84, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat silver captures the pawn on 84, maintaining their clear advantage. Cent silver captures the pawn on 35, but Goat is clearly on top. Goat drops a pawn on 36, a blunder that the engine preferred to dropping a pawn on 88, and the game now clearly favors Goat. Cent plays the gold to 46, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the pawn captures the knight on 37, promoting to a token, with check, though the engine preferred the horse capturing the rook on 18 instead. Cent's king captures the token on 37, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a pawn on 45, which is a blunder, as the engine preferred dropping a knight on 25 instead. Cent plays the gold to 47, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat's horse captures the rook on 18, a blunder that clearly favors Goat, though the engine preferred the pawn capturing the pawn on 24. Cent's lance captures the horse on 18, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a knight on 25 with check, a blunder that means the game now clearly favors goat, though the engine preferred pushing a pawn to 67 to promote to a token. Cent moves the king to 36, maintaining a solid castle around the king, though goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a rook on 28, with goat clearly on top now. Cent drops a bishop on 49. Goat plays the rook to 29, promoting to a dragon, a blunder that clearly favors goat, as the engine preferred the rook capturing the lance on 18, promoting to a dragon instead. Cent plays the goal to 48, though goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the dragon to 39, and they're clearly on top now. Cent pushes their pawn to 43, promoting it to a token. Goat's gold captures the token on 43, a blunder, as the engine preferred the dragon capturing the gold on 48, and the game now clearly favors goat. Cent's king captures the knight on 25. Goat's dragon captures the gold on 48, and goat is clearly on top now. Cent's pawn captures the pawn on 23, promoting to a token. Goat's bishop promotes to a horse on 47, delivering a check, and it's clear goat has a strong advantage. Cent drops a knight on 36. Goat drops a gold on 15, delivering check, which the engine thought was a mistake, preferring the dragon capture the bishop on 49 instead. Cent plays the king to 24, but goat is clearly on top now. Goat's rook captures the promoted silver on 12, a blunder that leads to a forced checkmate, with the engine preferring the dragon to capture the bishop on 49 instead. Cent drops a pawn on 72, but goat is clearly on top now, with a forced checkmate. Goat's horse captures the knight on 36, and goat now has a forced checkmate. Cent plays the pawn to 71, promoting to a token, with check, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat's king moves to 52, and goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent plays the lance captures the horse on 36, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat drops a silver on 13, with check, and goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent captures the silver on 13 with the token, but goat still has a forced checkmate here, which feels a little like an own goal. Goat drops a knight to 32, checking Cent, and now has a forced checkmate. Cent's king moves to 23, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat's rook takes the token on 13 with check, and the balance swings towards them. And there it is, Giku2_1c takes the game. Thank you for sitting with me at the board. I'll see you at the next one.